Have you ever heard sounds in your yard or in the forest you could not identify? On Exploring North Carolina, we will introduce you to the things that go bump in the night. Over the years, Exploring North Carolina has shown you the animals around us. In the water, in the air, and on the land. We have celebrated 265 species of freshwater fish. 185 kinds of butterfly. 60 salamanders. Some 450 species of birds, both resident and non-resident, that use North Carolina's fields, forests, and marshes. We have shown you the big game animals of North Carolina: deer, black bear, and turkey that can be found in many parts of the state. On Exploring North Carolina, we regret that we have not covered many of the 120 mammals living across this diverse land. It finally dawned on us that many of these animals live in our yards, parks, and in urban areas. These are the things that go bump in the night. These are the animals that turn over your trash can, that leave footprints on the hood of your car, but they also provide mystery and joy in our lives. Fortunately, there are experts to show us what we've been missing. We met with Dr. Roland Kays, an internationally known expert on camera trap technology. Dr. Kays is the head of the Biodiversity Research Lab at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and a research associate professor at North Carolina State University. We also met with Dr. Stephanie Schuttler, research associate for Candid Critters at the Museum of Natural Sciences. Since the dawn of time, man has observed animals in their natural element. But it has just been in the last century that we began to use cameras to spy on animals in their world. I asked Roland Kays and Stephanie Schuttler how long we've been working with hidden remote cameras and how these cameras serve as windows into the lives of shy creatures.
So camera trapping technology has matched camera technology. So the initial ones had, one frame with giant cakes of magnesium powder that would explode to light up the frame, to later 35mm rolls of film that you would get 36 exposures, to now finally we have good digital cameras that can take thousands of pictures, they can take video, they have infrared light so the animals don't even know they're being filmed. Most animals out there have very good sense of smell, hearing, and vision, and they want nothing to do with people. So they're really hard to actually see with your own eyes. But a camera trap, you can put on a tree, it's totally quiet, most animals don't even see it's there, and it gives us a view into the world of nature when humans aren't around. Camera traps are great tools because they sample any warm-blooded animal that's moving. And so you get a whole variety of animals. They have to be warm-blooded. They have to have a different temperature from the background to trigger the camera, the way most cameras are set. So we don't get reptiles very well. We don't get turtles because they're moving too slow and they're cold-blooded. But we do get mammals pretty well, especially the bigger mammals. The smaller mammals don't show up as well because the camera is usually set for the larger animals. So if you want to target the smaller mammals, usually you set the camera a little bit different. Usually you want to have a different focal length so that they'll be in focus when they're really close. And sometimes you need to sort of target the mammal with some bait, for example, or put it on a runway of a vole to try to get exactly where the animal's running along.
We work with camera traps, which are real cameras that are specifically designed to go outside. And they're triggered by heat and motion, so whenever an animal walks by, it takes a picture of it automatically. And on the pictures are also the date and time, so we know the location of the animal and when the picture was taken. The camera traps take night and day pictures. During the day, the pictures are in color, so you get these really beautiful images of wildlife like deer, foxes, and at night they use an infrared flash. And this is a reddish color flash, and we don't want to scare the wildlife. So if we were to use a traditional white flash, it might blind some of the animals and they might be scared and not come back to the area. So we don't want to use that even though it produces color photos. So the infrared flash produces black and white photographs. And we get a lot of animals at night that we don't see during the day. So some of them we see at both times, but animals like raccoons, opossums, coyotes, foxes, they usually come out at night, not during the day as much.
I ask our experts what hidden cameras can tell us about animals that would be difficult or impossible to learn from personal observations in the field.
A lot of people think that technology competes with nature and going outside, but I like to think they can actually complement each other. So with Candid Critters, we use technology like camera traps to take pictures of wildlife, and then you can upload these camera traps onto your computer and view pictures of wildlife that you would never be able to see before. As an observer, animals can be scared of us. So these camera traps, they're not scared of, and they'll walk right up to the camera traps and get these incredibly beautiful close-up pictures of wildlife that would be impossible to see as an observer.
The first thing you have to know when you're trying to work to conserve wildlife or biodiversity is what's there, and camera traps give you a good idea about that. The second thing is how many of them are there, which camera traps also let you help you to count the animals. And then finally, what's affecting their numbers? Why are there more here or less over there? Why are they disappearing from one place or the other? And by running lots of camera traps in many, many different places, you can make those comparisons and start to figure out what's good for animals and what's bad for animals.
Exploring North Carolina asked Stephanie Shuttler to show us how to set up a camera trap, as it would be used in state parks or your own backyard. Before seeing the creatures revealed on camera traps across North Carolina, I asked Roland Kays about his work in other parts of the world with camera traps and the possibilities for discovery.
One of my favorite expeditions that I've been on to in foreign parts of the world was a trip to Kenya. And the goal of this expedition was to recreate an expedition from 1909 to see how things were different today. The expedition in 1909 was led by Teddy Roosevelt, the year after his presidency. So he and his team were out there hunting larger mammals and also trapping smaller mammals. And so we went with the team today from the Smithsonian and went to exactly the same places. We followed his exact trail. We have pictures of us camping in front of a big rock outcrop that was exactly what they had in their pictures as well. And our camera traps were kind of the modern equivalent to sample the larger mammals to Teddy Roosevelt and his team out on horseback with guns. The world is changing very fast today, and animal ranges are expanding in some places and their range is contracting in other places, and camera traps are a great way to study that. We've had a project in Panama where we're looking at the leading edge of coyote colonization. So coyotes have expanded from originally being only in the western United States. They've now covered all of the eastern United States. They moved down into the rainforest in Central America, and we found them now marching towards South America. So we used them in Panama to map out how far they were, and we've actually got them now right at the edge of South America in the Darien.
On Exploring North Carolina, we've shown you trails across our state. Breathtaking vistas, wildflowers, and historic sites. In the footage provided to us by Roland and Stephanie, we were amazed to see that the trails used by hikers during the day are often a highway for seldom seen animals. Bobcat, bear, deer and fox, and a menagerie of other marvelous critters. Both Stephanie and Roland are scientists, and their information is used to give regulators important data about conserving wildlife populations in North Carolina.
Camera traps also help us with conservation as well. So if we are interested in a species of conservation concern, like an endangered or threatened species, getting those on camera trap can tell us where that species is. And we can alert the managers, like the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and then they can invest resources to potentially protect that species.
Camera traps are now used by conservationists around the world.
Camera traps are now a standard tool for conservation of wildlife to use to see where the animals are, where they survive, and where we need to drive our protection. So tigers are a great example. There's been a lot of research with camera traps on tigers. We know now where they survive, which parks they survive in, and we need to direct our attention to. We know which parks there's just a couple tigers in, and we need to really be careful. And we even know which parks have poachers, because we get pictures of the poachers chasing the tigers as well. And so then we know this is where we need to direct more of our ranger attention to try to reduce the poaching and help the tigers to survive.
Exploring North Carolina went to a wildlife veterinarian at the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, Dr. Maria Palomar, who uses hidden camera footage to learn more about the animals, their health, their numbers, and their needs.
Well, in the past, we usually found out about animal behavior or animal presence, but actually going out there into the wild and looking for them. But you can imagine that changes the way that they behave, and they may run away from you. So cameras have been an excellent tool that is non-invasive. We can put a camera there, we can walk away, and eventually the animals are going to start showing up. And they're not going to change their behavior because they won't see us. And now we have cameras that can send us the pictures. We don't have to go to the trees every single time. But using cameras as a way of monitoring wildlife is something that has been going on for a long time. We use cameras to, in some cases, count animals. If the animals have certain characteristics like spots or markings in their fur, we can tell one from the other. In some cases, just to figure out if they're there or not. So once we understand a habitat and the animals that are using it, we can choose how to protect that habitat or how to manage that habitat to have more or less of those specific animals. We also start understanding which animals are living in the same habitat. So we have coyotes and we have deer, and that helps us understand the relationship between them.
Can camera trap footage provide specific information to help with hunting season rules, dates, and bag limits? We asked Dr. Palomar about the use of these new tools.
Cameras help us understand how animals are using the landscape. And in some specific animals, like for example, antlered bucks, we can tell one from the other. So we can actually calculate the density of bucks in a specific area. For does, it doesn't work because all does look the same. So with does, what we understand is, are they using this habitat or are they not using the habitat? We cannot really count one from the other. So we can use some of that information to set bag limits. We can also get information on the ecology of the animal. When are the animals dropping their fawns, for example with deer, or when are the bears starting to leave mama bear and becoming independent? And that helps us with the timing of hunting.
Can camera traps help in assessing the health of animal populations?
Cameras can give us a glimpse of the health of a population of animals in the wild. We can see if there are any exterior signs of disease in the pictures. It's hard for me as a veterinarian to actually diagnose a disease, but I can tell you that the population is doing well or it's not doing well from some of those images. If we see animals that are very skinny, we can start thinking about, is this habitat providing enough nutrition? Do we have too many animals for this type of habitat or not? And we use cameras for that.
We asked Dr. Palomar, as a wildlife professional, if the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission can solve mysteries and debunk rumors with the use of camera traps.
Even before starting the Candid Critter project, we had a lot of hunters that had a lot of cameras out there. And although we do get reports of sightings, we have never gotten one image. You would think that after deploying all these camera traps in our state, we would be able to catch at least a glimpse of a black panther, or a cougar, or Bigfoot, or chupacabra. But we haven't yet. So I feel pretty comfortable at night that those creatures are not right now in our state.
Finally, we wanted to know if citizen scientists using camera traps can help science professionals to be more efficient and productive.
The Candid Critter program is an amazing program because it multiplies our efforts. We have only a limited number of biologists, so if we were the ones deploying those cameras, it would take us 10 years to get the same information that the citizens of North Carolina can get in 3 years. So this is going to give us a very good understanding of the state as a whole, instead of just the small location where we can deploy our cameras with our biologists.
We asked Roland and Stephanie to describe some of the more exciting discoveries made with these new tools used to describe the natural world.
So one of the most basic things that a camera trap can do is show you that an animal still survives. And there was a really interesting example in Angola. There was this giant, beautiful black sable antelope that only lives in Angola and hadn't been seen for 20 years. There was a giant civil war, biologists hadn't been able to get in there, and they were afraid that during this conflict with all these guns that people had hunted out the giant Angolan sable antelope. And thankfully, scientists setting camera traps found that they still survived in this one very, very dense forest, and they used this one picture to prove that the Angolan sable antelope is still alive, and that they've since expanded their monitoring to count them and figure out how to try to save the species.
I think the surprising thing is how beautiful some of the pictures are, and then also where we find them. So some animals we find in more urban settings, which we wouldn't expect. So for example, I work with kids and they run camera traps on their schools. And we actually compared the data from the school run camera trap to that run in Umstead State Park. And we had higher detections of carnivores like coyotes, foxes, raccoons on the school camera traps. And then one of the weirdest things that we've seen from our camera traps is opossums have this behavior where they roll leaves in their tails. So the first time that we saw it, we saw an opossum with a bunch of leaves in its backside area. But when we watched the pictures more closely, they actually gather the leaves to make a nest from their tail. So they go around collecting leaves, and their tail is prehensile, which means that it bends, so they're able to collect all these leaves.
Stephanie, who runs the Candid Critters program at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, told us about the benefits of camera traps for schools across North Carolina.
Camera traps are a really great resource for schools because they allow teachers and students to ask their own scientific questions. They deploy the camera traps either in their yards or on their school property, and it triggers pictures of animals. Then the students upload the photos to the emammal software. It's really easy to use, and they can look at the pictures more carefully. So they're not only identifying the animals, but they're observing the animals as they look through the photographs. And they might notice different things, like one species is found in one area of their school or not another, or they might look at different animal behaviors. So the idea is that the kids are participating in real scientific research, that they're contributing to science, and then this allows them to ask their own questions. So they might want to move their camera trap to a different area in the future, or continue in that area and see if they get new species, or if they can study these behaviors more in depth.
Because camera traps are now used by an army of citizen scientists across North Carolina, providing important information about wildlife populations, Stephanie and Roland told us about the citizen science program in North Carolina called Candid Critters, and about the data storage system emammal, used by scientists around the world.
The camera traps deployed by citizen scientists or volunteers are really valuable to us. In North Carolina, we're getting camera traps in all 100 counties of the state. So for myself and a team of researchers to set up all these cameras, it would be almost impossible. We would need such a huge team of scientists, and it would cost us a lot of time and money. So by working with the public, we're able to get this huge scale, basically a whole entire state. And this will allow us to complete the picture of where animals are found across the state. So both rare animals and really common animals. For example, we've known that coyotes have increased in population across the state since they've only been here for a few decades, but we don't know exactly where they live and what types of habitats they live in. So by working with people all across the state, we can get that information more accurately.
You can find pictures of animals in your area on the emammal website. Roland Kays explains how the emammal website was developed.
So another advantage of camera traps is the digital versions that we use today. Each camera can collect many hundreds of thousands of photographs, and when you start running lots of cameras in an area, you can quickly get thousands, tens of thousands, millions of pictures, which is great for helping to get more data to answer research questions. But it also becomes a challenge to manage. And so that's why we've created something called emammal, which is a software and database to manage tons of camera trap pictures. And people are now using emammal all around the world to help manage their data and to collect all the images and all the data into one place so we can make these comparisons that we need to see how things are changing over space or changing over time. And in fact, we're using emammal because it lets us be so efficient with managing camera trap data. We're using it in a project we call North Carolina's Candid Critters to run what might be the largest camera trap study ever, with 500 camera traps spread out into all 100 counties of North Carolina, working with citizen scientists to run the cameras and get an unprecedented look of the wildlife in our state.
All the camera traps are designed to record wild creatures around us. Don't be surprised if the camera trap in your yard or in the state park near you records your neighbor's dog or other domestic critters from your neighborhood. I asked Stephanie if there was a downside to the use of camera traps. Are citizen scientists sometimes disappointed not to find the things they were expecting?
I don't think people are really disappointed by that, but they're just interested to expand their knowledge about their local wildlife. And once they start running the camera traps, they'll be able to identify species better. So for example, before they start, they might know they're foxes, but after they'll be able to tell the difference between a gray fox and a red fox, and also to avoid confusion between foxes and coyotes. I do think that people do get a little sad if they don't get any animals on their camera traps, which is rare, but it does happen. But those data are also really important, because if you set out a camera trap and there's no animals on it, then that's an important data point. Why aren't there animals there?
The pictures and other exciting technology used by Roland, Stephanie, and other scientists can be found in Dr. Kays' recent book, Candid Creatures.
As we walk our fields and forests, bringing you Exploring North Carolina, we now have a greater appreciation for things we don't see, animals that are part of our rich wildlife heritage.
When the Wildlife Resources Commission approached the museum to try to implement a camera trapping citizen science project throughout the state, one of our main objectives was to get people out there in nature. We wanted people to understand what nature was around them and to fall in love with it, to become part of that. From children in schools to adult volunteers that could check out some of our beautiful state parks.
Perhaps you too will want to become a citizen scientist and observe the things in your yard that go bump in the night. And we learned this while exploring North Carolina.
This program is made possible by funding from the members of State Employees Credit Union to celebrate and promote awareness of North Carolina's extraordinary and unique water resources. Thanks also to Fred and Alice Stanback for their support of North Carolina's natural treasures. Exploring North Carolina is produced in association with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and UNC TV.